I'm here this evening with Paula Meehan. Delighted to have you here at the Instituto Cervantes. You were awarded the Ireland Professor of Poetry in September. Congratulations.
Thank you very
much.
And
what does this role entail, and what are your aspirations for it?
Well, it was set up to honour Seamus Heaney when he won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and it's awarded for a 3-year term to... I think I'm about the 5th poet to hold the position. And essentially what I do is I represent poetry within the academy. So I'll be attached to Queen's University in Belfast for a year, then down back in Dublin, here in Dublin, a year out in UCD and a year in Trinity College. And besides that, I would also have an outreach programme into the community. So essentially I'll be doing what I always do, which is teaching poetry, the craft of poetry, and doing readings and mentoring young poets. So it's a continuation of work I do anyway.
Yeah, it sounds really rewarding, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely, yeah.
So now to get on to your poetry, a lot of your poetry is rooted in your upbringing in working class Dublin, of course, and it chronicles everyday life. But what are some of the universal themes in your work, that make it so relatable to people regardless of where they're from?
Well, I think, it's a truism that really all poetry is about sex and death. I think if you are faithful to the lived life, the life as it's experienced in all its joy and terror, if you write convincingly of the details of your life as a citizen in the state, then I think, most experiences of being human, no matter what the situation is or the different cultures are, there are common things. So we all maybe fall in love, we all have family, we all feel sometimes, certainly in the big kind of nation states of Europe, we all often feel like, disempowered or disenfranchised. Certainly, writing as a woman, I would think that women's experience right across the planet has very similar rhythms, which are tied into the rhythms of our bodies and the rhythms of our fertility. So as parents and as children and as aunts, I think if you're faithful to your lived experience in language, then I think maybe other people, even if they don't share culture with you, can share the poem.
Okay, and your poetry is extremely lyrical, and it's even been set to music by Christy Moore. Did you always know you wanted to be a poet, or did you ever have, aspirations of a career in music?
Well, I would have, as a teenager, I suppose, a lot of the culture, which it still is now, a lot of the culture of suburban Dublin. Is bands, music, songs. It's fantastically rich in the song tradition, this island. So that would have been a massive influence. And I did, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a rock and roll star, I suppose. But I got more and more enchanted by the lyrics of songs. So by the time I came into my 20s, I was already absolutely dedicated to poetry.
Okay, and not just as an artist or a poet, but do you see yourself as a social historian? Because your poetry seems to capture important details of times that are gone forever and a way of life that you actually experienced firsthand.
Well, I suppose every poem, given enough time, I think Borges said that, becomes an elegy. So I think the details of your life and your culture that go into the poems, they become, after a certain length of time, like a fly trapped in amber. There's certainly that perspective on it, that you are, in some ways, you are also a victim of your history. But I think I don't think I'm a sociologist or a historian. I think poetry is a sovereign art and state. But obviously we can read a sociology into a poem, we can read a poem for its natural history, we can read a poem for the kind of philosophical ideas that have formed a poet. But I would say that poetry is certainly the lyric poet is the singular soul in its historical moment, the song of the self. Walt Whitman says, you know, I celebrate myself. I sing the song of the body electric.
Beautiful. So your poetry is steeped in nostalgia, and it can be very sad and poignant at times, but on the other hand, it's very hopeful. Do you think it's important for people to have poetry or some form of art or beauty in their life, you know, to keep them going, especially in difficult times?
Yeah. Well, nostalgia is an interesting word. It's sometimes used in a pejorative sense. You know, oh, nostalgia ain't what it used to be. But at the root of that word is the algia, you know, from the Greek word meaning pain, and nostos, the pain of community, of lost community. So there is that in the real sense of the word nostalgia. There's nostalgia there, but you know, we are creatures that are given a span on the earth, and in this absolutely beautiful creation, even though, you know, the species seem to be doing its best to destroy its own future by the things we do, or that's done in our name, to nature, to our environment. So, but I mean, I think the singing impulse of the lyric, I think, is always maybe has that sense of the Orphic in it, that it is to soothe. Certainly the rhythmic aspects of poetry are often that kind of lulling. The ritualization of the language can often have a soothing effect, quite apart from the sense of the poem, that the actual music of it can give comfort and sometimes can transmit maybe even more than the actual words individually mean. So you're in the territory where words have a certain kind of magic and power. Certainly I don't think life is hopeless, though I sometimes do find myself despairing of our rulers, and especially of the institutionalized mind, because I believe the poet and the artist needs to hold on to the Aboriginal self, or the Aboriginal sense of wonder in creation.
Okay, and I think actually my final question kind of touches on what you were saying there. You often, you know, deal with family and loss in your poetry. Do you think that you can ever come to terms with losing someone, or do you find a healing power in your words?
Well, I wouldn't make those kind of claims for the poetry. I think, I think part of a poet's work is maybe to make elegies, and I make elegies for people I have lost personally. But I would hope that they transmit, you know, people will come up and say, I read that poem at my father's funeral, or I gave that poem to my sister when she lost her child. So I think in that way I don't set out to provide anything really in my poetry. I just trust that I make it and I leave it there, and if people find it useful. But there may be a part of the work is to provide elegy for communities. I'm not sure. I wouldn't like to preempt anybody's use of a poem.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Paula, for talking to me this evening, and I hope you enjoyed, the first day of the festival as much as we did.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna. Thank you.